think it moves around.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 o'clock, so let's get going. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. And this is the first lecture of this sort that we've had in this building, our new visitor center. This house being built in 1913, and the Castle Society bought it a few years ago and leased out or rented out various suites in the building and then turned it into this visitor center. So we now have artifact storage in the basement underneath that new addition and offices upstairs, and that's allowed us to free up some of the building, more of the offices for presentation to visitors. And so after the lecture tonight, if anyone wants to go over to the castle, I'd be happy to take you over and we can snoop around a little. So tonight we have here Dr. Seth Hawkins, now a resident of St. Paul, Minnesota. He's the director of his own historic house museum there called the Julian H. Sleeper House. It opened in 1996, and the major collections in the house include exhibition rooms of life in the 1880s, aesthetic movement decor, artifacts, wallpapers, and so on. There's also quite a significant collection of memorabilia related to the late and murdered President James A. Garfield. It's the largest number of unique artifacts about him anywhere in the world. And unusually, in the basement of this house, there's the only museum dedicated to the Republic of Slovenia, anywhere in the United States. And Dr. Hawkins' background, well, he has a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry, a BA and MA in English, and a PhD in rhetoric. His dissertation was on Garfield's, that's President Garfield's, speeches before the U.S. Supreme Court. Dr. Hawkins is also a celebrity baseball fan, and if you do any internet searches for Dr. Seth Hawkins, you'll find that he's really known as Dr. Fan, because he is the one person in the United States that's been present for more records of milestones in Major League Baseball than any living person. He's also a unique supporter of Canadian culture and institutions, and 2 books are now in production on Canadian history. And Seth has been coming to Victoria since 1966, and that's the first year he came to Craigdarroch when the building was used as the head office of the Greater Victoria School Board. And I guess I met you, Dr. Hawkins, about maybe 10 or 12 years ago.
I'm 12.
Yeah, 12, yes. So I was interested in what he told me about President Garfield, because I really didn't know anything about him. He was a Republican, but a liberal Republican. He was killed in his first year as president by a man who was disgruntled because Garfield would not appoint him as ambassador to France. This killer was later executed. Before being president, Garfield was leader in the U.S. House of Representatives. He was a trial attorney, a Civil War general, and generally, to scholars now, recognized as ethical and pleasant and liberal. He also was the first, one of the first, I suppose, to draft civil rights legislation in the early 1880s. And without further ado, Dr. Hawkins, looking forward to your talk tonight.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Just to surprise you, let's start with a prank that you can play on any philosophy professor, even though the World Series is over. Ask him if the first pitch of a game can be a changeup. And the answer, of course, is that it can. And the rhetorical equivalent of that is, can a speech begin with a digression? Well, we just heard 2 of them. But we always get back from the digression. It may seem a little painful in the direct, but we do so. What we need to do now is get on the ship and examine, go up and down various coasts and examine something about the dangers, the truths, the challenges of being a maritime person. anyone who looks at maps over time of North America and of Europe over the past 500 years or so will notice that almost all of the important towns and cities and other settlements are on the coast. The coast supports life, but the coast also brings hardship. I don't have to tell any of you who have had ancestors who lived on either coast of Canada or elsewhere of the dangers, of the people you have lost in your family, of the perils of maintaining a maritime existence so that civilization in your country can grow and prosper, that the shipwrecks, the other tragedies at sea, the very name of, or the nickname given to the Belvedere, the Widow's Walk, testifies to the perils and perhaps even the guilt felt by people who did not go to sea, but who stayed behind to maintain the economies and the life and the families in the coastal towns. Simply a catalog as brief and sketchy as this one of the perils that seafaring folk and support individuals in seafaring towns face proves in itself the premise that those who live by the coast meet greater hardships, overcome greater challenges than those who survive elsewhere. That the farmer inland simply needs to get up early enough to bring his goods to market before a competitor buys them. But if he starts out too early before sunrise, he will be met by the highwayman who says, stand and deliver. Well, you know what a highwayman is. He was simply someone who was kicked out of a pirate's family because he got seasick, and therefore he had to live off the land and learn how to ride a horse. So his own punishment was scrambling for a living. So those of us who are from pirate families, of course, have that lame little rationalization and excuse. But the perils of being at sea are ones that could be experienced and understood only properly by people who actually did it. And even explaining it to their families once they safely, if they safely got back into port, was sometimes more difficult than it seemed. Well, these people were not literate, they were not articulate, they were simply people who met peculiar, unusual, and difficult challenges of life. They couldn't, even a very educated person could not explain the boredom, the confinement of being at sea for months at a time. Yet, it was the only possible way to conduct commerce. Think about the geography simply of North America and how it was impossible, either in what became the United States or what became Canada, to get across land, across the Great Plains, across the Laurentian Shield. It is no wonder that the colony of British Columbia quite sensibly insisted to Sir John A. that no, we're not going to join Confederation until we see those railway tracks being nailed into the ground down the Fraser River Valley. I don't blame them. And that is, of course, as you know, exactly what they did. So the commerce went down the coast, no Panama Canal, as you know, around Cape Horn and up to San Francisco, and then up to the twin colonies up here. The simpler times, sometimes better times, no Los Angeles, no Miami Beach. Yes, you appreciate that. And then people forget that San Francisco was the major port on the West Coast, and sometimes it wasn't very easy to get there either. So it was a maritime commerce. And even if you tried to describe what you had endured, including the boredom, including the fights, including the arguments in close confinement on a ship that probably was not big enough, and the perils, the near misses, the near deaths that occurred, that if you ran out of fresh water, you were done for. Or it didn't, even if there were a Red Cross then to give you swimming lessons, a marine storm, it wouldn't matter. If you were an Olympic quality swimmer, you were still going to drown. And part of the reason you could even drown in a calm sea, of course, humans don't have gills. They are not maritime creatures. They are fighting against their own biology and their own anthropology to make a living for the people who are on the sea, so that there was constant peril. The ship is becalmed, as in the ancient mariner. And Coleridge refers to the useless buckets on the deck, or the famous quotation that is so often misquoted, water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. So trying to explain all of these difficulties, problems, and near death to people who had not experienced them was nigh on to impossible. And of course, we hear rumors that even today, fishermen exaggerate. Not that I know about any of that, but it is said that they do. But since many of the perils were unimaginable to anyone who hadn't experienced them, sometimes it was natural to get and keep the interest of people who were waiting for you on land by making certain exaggerations. One of the terms for perhaps mythical being, or almost certainly mythical being, has passed into ordinary usage, the sound of a siren of an emergency vehicle, but that used to have a capital S. And of course, we hear about the sirens of mythology that were supposedly temptresses who had beautiful voices and who would lure the gullible sailors to their doom by singing beautifully to them. Hate to tell you, but you probably already know that the sirens were most likely sea cows and sea lions and various other creatures like that, and the sailors had been at sea for a long time. They could be hallucinating, they could have medical problems, or they could have a vivid imagination. Odysseus, who we'll probably get to more a little later, was perhaps a bit of a scientist. He insisted that he be strapped to the mast securely and his crew have wax put in their ears so they wouldn't hear the sirens. He would hear them and would be able to report on what it would be like to be tempted by them and still to survive. Well, at least that's how it goes in the text of the Odyssey. And then there are mermaids. These mermaids look very happy and peaceful. They've got beach balls. They're modern day fake mermaids. But don't believe the stories about them. Mermaids are not your friends. They are going to capture and kill you. They're an alien species. They're in no way human. And as the director of the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic suggested to me, sometimes with our audiences, if you mention something cultural, they're going to get out their magic phone, so you don't need audio-visual aids. The audience will do it for you. So at this point, if you are one of those modern smartphone people, you can look up Sir Edward Burne-Jones, one of the most prominent of the Pre-Raphaelites. And you know, sir, of course, that his paintings were mostly vertical because William Morris set him about working on church windows, and he never got out of his habit. And one of his most chilling and very vertical paintings, and there is a point to this, is The Depths of the Sea. And this long, narrow, underwater painting shows a sailor, a very healthy, muscular sailor, being brought to his doom by a mermaid who has captured him and is taking him down to her lair with a smirk on her face. She has captured a healthy human, and the last bubbles of air of his life are coming out of his mouth as she drags him down, with Burne-Jones having her stare directly at the imagined audience. So there's the truth about mermaids. But some exaggerations probably were not too exaggerated. We joke and laugh about the kraken now on those bottles of drink, but they are not far from the giant squid that have been confirmed by various marine biologists. "See, you should have believed me," said the captain and all of his crew. "I was not kidding about the kraken." And Captain Ahab can tell you about the white whale, they say. And whatever you imagine, there's probably something, not always, but there's often something to top it. When various marine biologists a few decades ago were exploring off the coast of Madagascar, they said, "We found a coelacanth, extinct for 52 million years." And the uneducated Malagasy fishermen said, "You know, we catch these every day of the week. Where have you been?" "Extinct for 52 million years? I don't think so." So sometimes all of those scholars turn out to be wrong. So the sea yields up its mysteries more often than one might imagine. And sometimes the truth is a great deal stranger than fiction, pardon the cliche. You don't have to make that sort of thing up. But you read in the papers or heard on CFAX, I'm here to compliment you because you've earned it for living on the coast. But just as we needed to get Sir Edward Burne-Jones out of the smartphone to testify about keeping away from the mermaids, so we need someone in back of us to prove that the cyclical patterns that are out there in reality are ones that people on the coast are attuned to, and they need them for their survival and prosperity. Now, some of these things are so nearly universal that they don't need to be remarked upon, like the cycle of the day and night. I mean, primitive people caught on to that pretty easily, that you really probably don't have to propitiate the sun god every single night when they decide that, yes, the sun is coming up again, so you probably need to do sacrifices for him whenever it seems like it. But even some of those daily rituals have become part of culture and even politics. The daily raising and lowering of your nation's or state's flag ceremonially is ultimately, if you roll the tape back, related to the appeasing of the sun god. Otherwise, it would not be as easily remembered. But those folks inland that are harvesting the Saskatchewan potatoes, yes, you know that, the synonym for rocks, that they have certain misapprehensions. They imagine that Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, put the moon there to make it easier for people who live in Saskatchewan or Nebraska to go hunting at night. Well, of course, using a technical term, they're wrong and they're foolish. That Artemis is a wiser goddess than that. She did that so that she could be honored as being a goddess watching over the only planet that has a satellite of that size and that importance. And as Darwin was having his influence on the 19th century, even poets who are normally a wee bit deranged, well, don't blame me. Shelley said, "I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed." You know, that is poetry worth studying? I don't think so. But Coventry Patmore, very obscure Victorian British poet, probably one of the last people to be educated in science, still understood, at least implicitly, 20th century subatomic physics. He said, "But for compulsion of strong grace, the pebble in the road would soon explode and fill the ghastly boundlessness of space." That's not too bad for a 4-line poem about subatomic physics. And the fellow he saved from Dune.